Okay, here's a little tutorial on how to disassemble one of these Lyshome superchargers. That a lot of people will see these and say they're a Whipple, but these are actually a Lyshome supercharger. Whipple didn't start doing their own mass production and marketing until, if I remember correctly, right around '05, late '05, maybe a little bit post '05. But these are the ones that you will find most common on like the New Edge Saleen Mustangs. This one here is what they would call the Series 4 supercharger. I couldn't find any videos or instructions on how to tear one of these down to service it or even just to clean it. Because you have to remember, there's a lot of oil vapor and dirt can still get inside of these. I purchased this one used for my car. It came with all the fixings, intercooler, intake manifold, injectors, all that good stuff. So I got it at a pretty fairly good price, but still it needed to be cleaned. So in tearing one of these down, the easiest way to do it really is once you get your air inlet elbow off the back, get your fluid drained out. There is a drain plug down here on the bottom. Put this over a drain pan of some kind, pull that plug and let the oil drain out of it. Just be forewarned, the oil that's inside of these does smell bad. I would dare to say that it smells worse than differential fluid. I'll also get into what type of oil to put back in these and how much. Now, some of the things I've read in some of the forums, people talk about to get these apart, you basically just rip all the bolts out and take a hammer to it, or a hammer and a block of wood, a chisel, whatever. Please do not do those types of things to these superchargers. You will run the risk of damaging these, not just on the outside, but on the inside as well. One of the things you have to remember is not only do you have the front of the casing, but this piece here that looks like a spacer, that's actually what your drive gears are attached to, and those gears are attached to your rotors, and those rotors go into your needle bearings that are in the back. You also have to remember these have zero tolerance inside of these. If you do anything to flex the insides of these, inside these casings, you will damage something. The easiest way that you will find to take these apart is once you get the casing, the front casing off. These are very, very, very simple to take apart. Do not be afraid to dive into these and take them apart. If you do pretty much everything that I tell you and work off of that as a basics, you will have zero issues with taking these apart or putting these back together. Like I said, once you get the oil drained out, you have a clean surface to work on these. When you go to take these bolts out, you don't have to take the pulley off or take the front snout off unless you're replacing the seal or replacing any component inside of these. You do not have to take this here apart. You will only have to take these Allen bolts out. Keep in mind though that this one here sits into a recess. If you have a way of laying these bolts out to keep track of how they go back in, that is your best route. If you get these bolts mixed up and you go to put a long bolt in a short bolt housing, or the boss, you can run the risk of damaging your threads, cracking your case, breaking the bolt off inside of the casing, and that is something that you do not want to do. So keep in mind that one bolt will be a different size than the rest of them. Once you get those bolts out, you can just wiggle the snout and this will come off. But before you do that, and I should have told you this beforehand, if you notice I have my pulley marked to the snout. Do that before you take this here front casing off. Because once you get that off, mark the drive gears on the inside. You have 2 drive gears. On one of those gears, you will have a coupler. That coupler will have, if I remember correctly, it has like 3 holes in it. 3 or 4 holes, and that has to mesh up to the dowel pins that's on the hub at the end of basically the drive shaft that's inside of here. Once you mark those gears and you have your pulley marked to the snout, and when you go to put this back together, I personally have found that it does mesh together a lot easier. So that way you're not sitting there wiggling, trying to turn it to try to find out where it's lining up at, and then you think you got it, and then you go to put the bolts in, and then you ended up ruining something, and then you got to take it back apart. I have patience, but I have even less patience whenever I do something myself to screw something up when I could have avoided it. So, like I said, mark the pulley to the snout, mark your drive gears, and it should make putting this back together a lot easier. So, skip back. Once you get this off, and you will notice that the hole that's on this quote-unquote spacer, now, like I said, keep in mind, though, this spacer actually goes down inside of here quite a bit. And you will find that this hole and this hole that's on that spacer are threaded. And it's a bigger thread than what the bolt is that holds the casing, or the front of the casing on. What I have found, and like I said, do not take a hammer to these. Do not take a hammer, a 2x4 chisel, none of that. You will mar something up, and you run a chance of breaking something. You can easily break these ears off, or basically just make it look like crap, and like I said, you run a risk of doing more damage than what's necessary. One of the things you can do is, what I done is I went to the hardware store and got a 8mm by 1.25 thread Allen headed screw plug. I had 2 of them that were longer than this one here, and I don't know what happened to them. Another thing you can do as well is get a piece of threaded rod, 8mm by 1.25 thread, and you can actually just match it up to the boss, mark it, cut it, and you can take like a cutoff wheel, hacksaw, whatever, and cut a slot in the end of it, so that way you can use like a straight screwdriver to screw it in, or to screw it back out, or to remove it. Once you have that plug in place on both this hole and the one on the bottom left, top right and bottom left, you take, and this is where it gets a little crazy, a 3/8 by 16 threaded bolt. And everything's supposed to be metric, but for some reason these 2 holes in that plate ended up being a 3/8 by 16. Make sure you have 2 of these bolts handy. Once you thread it into the plate on the top right and bottom left, screw it in till it butts up against that plug that you screwed into the boss on the top right and bottom left of the casing. Once you do so, you just take your wrench, socket, whatever, with a ratchet, and you turn it equal amounts on both of those corners, and what happens is it will extract that whole entire piece that's inside this casing that your rotors are attached to. You run a lower risk of damaging the needle bearings that are inside here, because these here rotors, they have a stub on the end of them, and that stub fits into those needle bearings. Unless you're replacing the needle bearings, just clean them up, re-lube them. You'll be able to tell if the needle bearing's going bad, because there will be a little bit of play inside where the stub goes into them. That's on the end of the rotors. If you don't have that play, I wouldn't mess with them. Like I said, just clean them, lube them up very well. And when you go to put it back together, like I said, you can clean the insides of these, clean off your rotors. Do not take a grinder or a buzz wheel to your rotors, because those are Teflon coated, and you do not want that Teflon coating to come off. You will lose vacuum. You will run shitty boost. Do not take that Teflon coating off. To put these back together, you carefully put it back in, take the piece that has the rotors, insert it back into the needle bearings. You'll be able to feel that it goes in there. And once you get them preset, you can just take like a soft-faced hammer, like a rubber mallet, and very lightly tap on the front of the plate, and it'll go right back in. Now, whenever they manufacture these, they do press them in with a press. If you feel safer by not tapping it with the hammer, you can take and get shorter 8mm by 1.25 threaded bolts, and start threading them in and press them in with, press this plate and everything in with those bolts. When you go to, after you get your front housing back on, don't forget about one of these bolts being a different length. Make sure it goes back into its correspondent hole. These bolts are torque spec'd at 170 inch-pounds, not wrist tight and a couple of ugga-duggas. None of that garbage. Torque these to 170 inch-pounds. That is straight from Saleen. If you ever have to take this snout off to do any servicing of it, these 6mm are torque spec'd at 120 inch-pounds. Once you get all that back together and you go to fill this with oil, save yourself some money. Do not get those overpriced Supercharger oil bottles from GM or some overpriced garbage that somebody is selling, because, who cares if you're putting big name brand stuff in here? Nobody's going to see it. Nobody cares. Saleen specifically said 5W50 synthetic oil. I checked around, and the only place in my area that carried it, AutoZone didn't carry it, Advance didn't carry it, none of the other stores carried it, O'Reilly's, none of them. Napa was the only place that carried this oil. You may or may not go through that entire bottle in the lifetime that you own your car or truck that has this type of supercharger that requires this type of oil. I will probably sell my car before I even see the bottom of this bottle. Now, as far as quantity or the amount of oil that you put into it, these are required to have 5.8 ounces. And some people figure, just throw 6 ounces in it, you'll be good. What's a little bit of overfill? Well, tell you what happens is, and some people say, well, just go ahead and fill it till you see it come out of this port here. No, don't do that either. What happens is, once you go too far up, your oil, because as things start spinning inside, oil will pull towards the end of the stub or the end of the snout. And then you're going to start seeing oil getting flung all over the place every time you open your hood. So that's why it is specified 5.8 ounces, not 6 ounces, not 3 gallons, not till it pours out of where the hell ever, 5.8 ounces. And what I found the best way to do it is just get a small painter's cup, and you will see that right here, it says 5 ounce, 6 ounce, 7 ounce. You see where it says 175 milliliters? That is pretty much at your 5.8 ounce mark. Fill it to that 175, put a small funnel in, pour your oil in, you're done. Mine came with a dipstick on the end of the filler cap. Once I screwed that in, screwed it back out, checked it, it was right on, perfectly on the full mark. So remember, 5.8 ounces, not 6 ounces, not the full cup, not till it pours out of where the hell ever. Because otherwise it's going to start pouring out of places you don't want it to. But yeah, throw your elbow back on, throw it back on the intake, whatever you're doing, and you should be good to go. Now, as far as gaskets, I only was able to find one place that had all the gaskets that I needed for these. It's a place out of, I believe it was Iowa, called JB Performance or John Bond Performance. Cool people to work with. They were understanding on what I needed. Their gasket kit was very well priced within my budget. The gasket set that they have for these will come with the plate gasket that goes, for your intercooler. There's a gasket behind here. It comes with that gasket. It will come with the one that your supercharger spacer plate will sit on on top of the intake. So it'll come with that gasket. It'll come with a throttle body gasket. It'll also come with the IAC gasket, EGR gasket, and it will come with the base plate gasket where your air discharges on your supercharger, and it'll also come with the bypass gasket for your butterfly. And it will come with a tube of sealant for the elbow. I couldn't find a gasket for this. You can try cutting a gasket for it. Probably going to be pretty pointless because there is one bolt that is on the bottom. It's threaded on the supercharger, but there is no bolt hole on the elbow. So that's the reason why you use the sealant. This sealant is pretty much designed for high intake pressure. So you won't go wrong with using this stuff. Use very, very little. You don't need to glob it on and smear it on. Just cut the end of the tube off and a very small bead along the outer edge. Because you got to remember, once you smush this together, goes together, it will flatten out whatever sealant you put in there. So I just put it right along the outer edge, around the bolt holes, threw it back together. Pretty sure I'm good to go. The gasket set all together with shipping was right around 120, if I remember correctly. If the UPS option is given for shipping, go with UPS. Don't go with postal. Postal service sucks between Iowa and Michigan, if you're in the Michigan area like I am. Plus with the weather, if it's foul weather, it makes it even worse. UPS would be the same price. Me personally, I should have went with UPS, not the U.S. Postal Service, because they're, yeah. Let's just leave that at that. But the people at JB Performance, yeah, they were great. They also have other items that will work very well for these superchargers. But yeah, check them out. Just give them a good shout. A quick shout out. They were great people to work with. But yeah, hopefully this will help somebody out on dismantling these and putting them back apart. Like I said, do not be afraid to take these apart. they are very, 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 very easy to take apart and very easy to put back together. But yeah, a lot of people look at these and they think, seeing it with the purple snout, they instantly think it's a Whipple. But honestly, this is not a Whipple. Unless it says Whipple here on this machine surface on either side, these are not Whipples. This is actually a Lysholm. If I remember correctly, it's Lysholm is the spelling of it. There's this big history thing on between Eaton, Lysholm, Whipple. But yeah, like I said, I don't know if I said it before, but Whipple, they didn't start manufacturing or mass marketing their own product under their own name until like post 05 or right around 05. But mainly Whipple was getting their stuff from Lysholm. These are pretty much nothing but an air compressor. Lysholm was very well known for manufacturing twin screw air compressors. They were more efficient and more durable and more reliable than the piston drive setup as far as like your standard air compressors. But I guess they got their heads together at some point in time and figured out, hey, let's take our design and make a supercharger. I'm not 100% sure. I think that they were also putting or manufacturing superchargers for like airplanes and stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that, but that's a whole different history lesson. Look it up online. As far as Lysholm superchargers, there'll be this big article on how they worked with other companies. Twin screw setup is regardless on who the big name brand manufacturer is, as far as performance wise, the twin screw design is, from what I gather, was originally based off of a Lysholm design. Lysholm is like the godfather or the grandfather of the design of the twin screw setup. Like I said, look it up online. I may be misquoting a few things there, but yeah, it's very interesting on how that they're worked out with Lysholm and some of the other companies. But Lysholm is, from what I gather, is a very reliable setup as far as what they built. So, but yeah, hopefully this helps some people out. Like, share. You don't have to subscribe. I can care less because I don't put out enough content. If I come across something that I think might help other people out, I'll put it on. Otherwise, it's to each their own. But not trying to be an ass or anything like that. But yeah. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully somebody can learn something from this, and hopefully it helps some people out. Like I said, don't be afraid to tear into these. They are easy to do. Any questions or anything like that, just leave them in the comments. Just try to be respectful. And if anybody's got any questions or anything like that, hopefully I got something that I can put your way to help you out. So, like I said, like, share, whatever. Hopefully this helps somebody out.